Welcome to Weekly Wins and Losses. My name is James Heppner, former real estate entrepreneur turned self-development hacker, coach, and fulfillment strategist. Each week, we bring you a thought to wrestle with that'll help you live fully alive and gain more life. Real life is made up of both wins and losses. Both were designed for your good. That's basic reality. Without facing and learning how to embrace your losses for greater gain, you miss out. You leave 50% of your life experience on the table. So with that, let's begin the show. When I originally thought to begin this podcast, I never thought I would have this many people listening. Honestly, blown away. Now, a couple of things that I just wanted to share, and that is many of you have been reaching out to inquire about working with me. And the questions, they all seem to follow and stem from the similar pattern. So I wanted to make your understanding of that and what that would look like super easy for you to understand. Let me tell you just a little more about my actual business. I do live events like retreats and keynote speaking. I do group and one-on-one coaching. I also host a no-charge Friday noon virtual weekly wins and losses global video call. Now, I have to say, there is a distinct difference between the one-on-one strategic results coaching experience and the live group work like our virtual weekly wins and losses global call. One-on-one strategic results coaching goes super deep. This is for those that are deeply hungry for the ultimate personal transformational experience. You'll know who you are if you feel this. Because it's just you and we get to get beneath the surface and your individual experience of life. We get to align with all of that and all of your strengths. And from that place, sculpt, craft, and design a personal success and fulfillment formula that is unique to you. Again, this is for those that are hungry and want it all. Now, the virtual weekly wins and losses global call is quite the experience. Frankly, and this is my view, it's one of the better ways to bring raw truth to what your last week was really all about. It's no charge and happens every Friday at noon. Jumping onto the super simple call will deliver a profound experience for you as you'll clear the deck of the unhelpful stings of the last week's losses so that when your new week begins, you're best able to launch out of the gate invigorated and ready to take bold, courageous action forward without the unhelpful side of hesitation and delay. So I invite each one of you to show up and share as you wish, or simply observe others share a personal win and personal loss that stood out for them from the past week. Come and master the art of being prepared for anything, win, lose, or draw. Come and learn how to authentically celebrate both a win and a loss in real time, every time. For live events, keynote speaking, group, and one-on-one strategic results coaching, simply go to www.jamesheppner.com. For the no-charge virtual weekly wins and losses global call happening every Friday at noon, simply go to www.weeklywinsandlosses.com. Scroll halfway down the page and click on the link that says join this Friday call. So now, please sit back and enjoy this free information. I challenge you to engage with it, and I sincerely hope it brings you value, stirs you to the needed new perspective, and maybe even brings an important question to the surface that will help clarify your next move forward. So with that, may this episode number 23, Loving Life After Loss, change your everyday life.
Welcome, friends. This week we have on the podcast someone that is a pretty special human being, Marie Alissi. Marie, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Not a problem. Marie is someone who loves life, and she has developed an insatiable desire to heal the world from grief. After 7 years of being a mindset mentor, her tools were put to the test, and I'd say probably absolute test, when adversity shook your family of four. Your husband, Marie, Rob, passed away in a business trip when their boys were only 10 and 8. So Marie took everything she had learned to become a shining example for her sons and now thousands of people around the globe. So in short, if I'd say it this way, and if I could add anything, Marie, I'd say You work in the field of grief, and your movement is called Loving Life After Loss. You teach people how to work
Yes.
with their mindset and various tools to allow love, laughter, joy back in after adversity. Ouch, that is so beautiful. I love that so much.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's so
Thank you.
expansive, right? Emotionally, it's just beautiful. So, Maria,
Yeah.
let me just say
Yeah.
it this way, right? When I got to know you a while ago, I could relate with you on so many levels. That
Mm.
instant life force connection that we struck up was actually pretty profound.
Yeah.
When you
Mm.
when you're with someone and they're just deeply present right from the beginning, it's really a unique experience. And what I noticed
Yeah.
about you instantly is that you're a person of strength, and your willingness to engage in the highest and most influential state of love, which is, and as you
Mm.
see here, on one side is a lion, other side's a lamb.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, the world sees the lion as being very firm, and then
Mm.
the lamb being overtly soft. And we both know that influential love, the only state of influential love, is when firm and soft come together. It's not
Mm.
just firm, because that's weak love.
Yeah.
If it's just soft, that's
Yeah.
weak too. And so your presence was that coming together. And so,
Thank you.
um, absolutely, and so, and I'll just cue this up for you listeners. After I have spent some time getting to know Marie, there's a few focal points and a few connections that, I'll be honest, Marie and I can relate quite well. And by the way, Marie, if I get something wrong, just chime in and say, I disagree, James. You're not that, but I am, or vice versa. Right?
Nothing to disagree so far.
That's wonderful. Um,
Thank you.
I would say that we both get super focused on taking personal ownership for our responsibilities right quick. Like we want to see what we can do
Yeah.
about it, right?
Yeah.
And likewise, we have found a way of leading into some elevated levels of uncertainty, and that is fostering a
Mm.
healthy relationship with our need for variety in the toughest times in life. And for Marie,
Yeah.
for you,
Yeah.
that was when you experienced the death of Rob. And for me, it was 12 years ago when I
Yeah.
died, to how I once showed up in the world for myself and for others. And when I completely died,
Mm.
basically, towards my old self, and it became a new version of a human. So of course, you and I, we've spent
Mhm.
some intense work redesigning our life, right? And so
Yeah.
when I think
That's
about
that's a
some of this,
perfect word. Yeah.
right? Yeah, yeah. So when I think about some of
Mm.
this intensity, I'd say we've been developing our inner musculature towards comfortably enjoying our uncertainties, both the surprises that we want and also those uncertainties that are a little bit more difficult to swallow. And
Yeah.
I would say, Marie, correct me if I'm wrong, but that makes you and I, like I know when you and I are talking, I'm just laughing to myself as we're getting to know each other, because you're raw, I'm raw. You're unfiltered, I'm
Mhm.
unfiltered. We just can't do it
I'm
any
very
different.
unfiltered. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So whether
This is a
you meet,
disclaimer, by the way. I'm very unfiltered. So watch this space.
it's so you watch your space, and you're like warning. Yeah, that's so good. So whether you meet Marie on her podcast or me on this podcast, or whether you meet her and I in a grocery store, or whether you meet her on stage or I on stage, or let's say it like this, you meet either her and I on our way to the mailbox on a chilly, rainy Saturday morning, you're going to meet the same person, right? So this is just who we are.
Absolutely.
It's just who we are, right? And so there's nothing more
You
than
should see
I'm.
my mailbox, by the way.
It's so good. Oh yeah, that's, and what's interesting when you said mailbox, the first thing that keeps in mind is, are you talking about the physical mailbox or the email box? You
I'm
never know
talking
what
about
we're
my
talking.
letterbox, actually.
Oh,
My
it's so
physical
good.
letterbox. Yeah.
So Marie, without further ado, share with us, if you don't mind, if you're okay with it. I just want to be sensitive in your journey, but if you're okay with it, if you don't mind, I know when you and I first got to know each other, when you shared your story of Rob and
Mm.
what had happened that day, where he was, where you were, just describe for the audience, if you don't mind. Take some time here and
Yeah.
just honor that. Go ahead.
I need a tiny, tiny paragraph before that. So just to paint a picture, right? Rob and I were that couple. Everybody always referred to us as, oh my God, the two of you, you're still so in love. That's almost, like it's almost too much to bear. And
Mhm,
people made jokes about it, but in the most beautiful and lovely way.
mhm, mhm,
So when I received those news, it really just, I don't know, I often describe this moment as, imagine, and I'm showing my age here, your favorite happy song playing on a record player, and all of a sudden the needle scratches over and the music stops. That's how that moment felt to me. I received a phone call while Rob was on a business trip that he had deceased in a hotel room that morning. And it was just surreal. I have no other words. It was absolutely surreal when I heard the news, because building up to that phone call, I had my anxiety levels rising, and I'm usually not a very anxious person at all. But that day, I felt something was going on. I didn't hear from Rob. I couldn't get in touch with him. I'm like, what's going on? Did he forget his phone? Did he lose his phone? Like, what's going on? You know, I couldn't hear. Like, I'm texting him, I'm calling him, I'm saying, babe, I'm getting really worried. Can you please get back to me? There's something going on. Till I had this, oh my God, I've got the number of the hotel where he's staying. I'm going to call the hotel. And as I'm dialing the number, I had this very split second vision of Rob collapsing in the shower. And I'm like, what are you doing, Maureen? You're driving yourself mental. Don't buy into that.
Wow.
But because I had that vision, I said to them while we were on the phone, and can you please check in the shower? I thought they must think I'm mental. I can't tell them about my vision. Like, I just said it like that. I said, and can you please check in the shower? And that's where they found him. Rob had a brain aneurysm and collapsed in the shower and died on the spot. It was just one of those freak moments in life where, you know, he was in the prime of his life, 45, super fit, healthy, went to regular checkups. You know, he was a surfer, and there was nothing that could have indicated that. And yet that's what life had to offer for us. So that was the moment.
That's intense. That is super, super. Which one of us, my aunt, Helen, her husband, Ed, of, I don't know, I think 60 years or so, just passed away. And he passed away just before they fell asleep. And she was still able to talk with him briefly. And then he closed his eyes and he just said, I don't think you'll understand, he said. And then he was gone. And, you know, for her, the shock and trauma, exactly, right? The shock and trauma is still deep. And I don't know what comes up for you, but I know when I hear your story and mine, often what we do is we say, which story would I rather have? And I think perhaps neither, because when the love of our life goes to another place, it's like we want them back. We just want them back, right? And so when I listen to the grief and the pain, when I say neither, at least my aunt had a chance to be with him. You didn't. You just had this nuanced thought, this vision, and you said it, and it was almost like your words. And I wonder sometimes, so perhaps a question that I have for you right now just popped into my awareness. How did you move beyond being traumatized with your thoughts that come into words? Because you said it, and I'm sure you thought prior to me asking you this, how are my words actually revealing what's happening? And so do you hesitate when you want to speak? Like, how did you get through that trauma of having this awareness and then speaking without fear?
Yeah, I have to say, are you talking about as in speak about it now or at the very beginning?
Well, and you know, perhaps this doesn't relate directly to your experience, but I'm just thinking, so going back to you were on the phone with the attendant, and then you had the vision and you said, listen, I can't help, but could you go check the shower? Meaning you had a vision, you had the thought, and then the words came out. And sometimes when that happens, we neuroassociate.
There was
we're
no,
like, yeah. So
it was just,
how for
I
today?
saw it and I had to say it. So, you know, it was just really, I thought there's a reason why I'm seeing this. That's just, I didn't really think that clearly. It was just, you know, a spare of the moment. And I have to say, when I received that phone call, there was a very bizarre bilingual brain moment, because, you know, for the listeners here who don't know, I was actually born and raised in Austria. So my mother tongue is German. And though I'm pretty fluent these days in English, I still have a lot of words that are new to me that I don't know. And one of the words that I had never heard before was coroner's office. I had
Say
no idea
again?
what a coroner meant. When a sergeant from the coroner's office rang me and he said, I'm Sergeant such and such from the coroner's office, I had no idea what coroner meant. So in my head, I'm still playing with the possibility that he had an accident, that they're calling me, that he's in ICU or whatever. I had no idea what that meant. And I have to say, that was a blessing in that very moment, because it didn't hit me like with one big slap. It came in steps, and it kind of dampened that hit for me a little bit, if that makes sense. And then of course, you know, when he was telling me the news, and that sentence still echoes in my head, I'm sorry to inform you that your husband deceased in a hotel room in Perth this morning. That was the exact sentence. I'll never forget that. It felt surreal. I'm like, that's not right. You know, there must be an accident. He's somewhere in ICU. It felt so surreal, and yet it hit me quite quickly. It really hit me quite quickly that this was it, because my whole body felt it. It was like a wave that came after the words. It was like a delayed reaction. My whole body felt it. And it was almost like the proof that I had already felt the entire day. I was like, there's something off. There's something not right. Rob's not like that. I could always rely on him. He said, I'll call you at 7:30 to wake you up, because my phone was charging and updating, and, you know, I said, don't worry about it. I'll ring you. I'm like, awesome. I woke up, looked at the clock. It was 7:31 and he hadn't rung me. And that's very unusual for Rob, you know. So it was like a build up the entire day, but my brain literally went into functioning mode after that. I just did what I felt I had to do. I literally just, it was from that very moment, I felt just guided for every next step. There was no thinking it clearly, like thinking it through clearly. There was no thinking about the next step. It was just like, okay, you need to go downstairs and tell the boys. That was the first step. I knew they had to know first out of everyone. So I sat with them. I shared the news with them. There is no sugarcoating those news. I had to say it straight out that their dad had passed. It was horrible. This was by far the worst thing I ever had to do in my entire life, telling the boys. You know, they were 10 and 8 at the time, and they fell apart. That 3 seconds that I had to prepare coming down the stairs, telling them, I don't know what to expect. Of course, you expect tears, you expect shock, you expect all of that, but I didn't expect screaming. And that really threw me. It pierced through my heart. And they were both screaming and falling apart. And I just sat there and held them. And then we all cried, you know, and then I knew, like, we went through, I don't know how much detail you want here, but there was 2 things that really were quite impactful for me. One of them was my older son spoke first. He was 10. And he said, but who's going to look after us now, Mum? And I said, I will look after you. I still remember saying it twice. And I only realized later how profound that was for me to actually say it out loud. It was like a promise that I made to them that I knew was not just important for them to hear, but also important for me to say it out loud and for me to hear me say that. It was something I'm like, yeah, I'm the one now. I'm it. You know, I'm the one looking after you. There's no sharing anymore. It's me. And the other one was from my 8-year-old son, who said, I'm only 8 and I'm not going to have a daddy anymore. And that really pierced right through me. And it just, you know, it just doubled and quadrupled this whole, I will look after you. I'm going to make sure that you are going to have a freaking awesome life, you know. And that was, yeah, a very profound and important life-changing moment for us, as you can imagine.
You know,
Yeah.
it's such a fascinating concept. So many of us, we love the concept of peace. Peace is a beautiful thing, right? We all want it.
Yeah.
And sometimes, of course, the concept of peace, people have this illusion that you're going to be sitting and meditating, floating away in a wave. And it's like, we don't want to float away in a wave, because then we're not going anywhere, right? But this thing of peace, people say, may you go in peace. I heard a little parable a little while ago, just a little writing, that this gentleman is a poet, and he wrote and he said, may you go in pieces. And I just broke down, and it was so beautiful, because if I listen to your story, it's so funny how in 3 seconds or less, you had to configure around what you're going to tell the boys, 10 and 8.
Yeah.
Then you told them and they fell apart. So really what happened is, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, so correct me if I'm wrong, but they kind of fell into pieces. And what's interesting is part of processing grief and just part of living is that we're allowed to process what's in front of us. And so if you look at, if you had tried to package this like there weren't pieces, no, you firstly leveled with them that they may feel like they're going in pieces. And what's interesting, going in pieces brings ultimate peace. Going in pieces creates the peace, because the pieces, you think that you're going to fall apart when you're in pieces. But being in pieces, when you realize that this isn't the end, but the pieces are the charge. It's like your boy said to you, hey, Mom, who's going to take care of me? And what's interesting is that was the moment likely, and I don't want to give words to your experience, but it was likely, and I wonder, I should say it this way. It was him saying, now that I'm in pieces, now that I can observe here quietly that I'm in pieces and I'm crying,
mm,
I have a
mm.
question that's birthed now in 3 seconds or less, right? He comes up
Yeah.
with this and he says, that was one of your boys. And it's like, who's going to take care of me? And then you're
Mm,
like, oh, son, I'll take care of you. And so slowly
mm,
you're putting the pieces, and when you think together, but it's like actually there are some pieces that can never be put back together. So may you go in
mm.
pieces so that they have the
Yeah.
strength of the piece in the middle. Sure, you came along as a
Mm,
construct to help support them in their life,
mm.
but it was a beautiful play, right? One of the things I was
Yeah.
going to ask you, so just a different way of asking than what I asked earlier. I
Mhm,
guess what I was curious about is sometimes when we have an experience, for example, for you as a body felt experience prior to you talking to the
mm,
hotel,
mm,
and you're feeling this, and while you're on the phone, you're hesitating to say it, and you're thinking,
mm.
should I or should I not? You think, well, whether you think I'm crazy, mad, whatever, I just got to say it. Sometimes we have the feeling after, wait a minute, if I hadn't said it, I wonder if it wouldn't have
Mm,
happened. I mean, that's really crazy, but
mm.
you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
ever um feel like you really are challenged to speak because you're afraid what you're going to say is what's going to happen? Do you ever have that feeling?
Not anymore. I dropped it a long time
Oh,
ago.
that's so nice.
I very much speak from my heart now because, we're going to talk about my movement in any way, but
Please.
I'm just taking that up front.
Yeah.
Like in the first 9 months when I created this movement, where people come to receive love
Hmm.
and healing and have
Hmm.
that space of really just being there and yeah, the first 9 months was tiptoeing around. How do I
Mm.
say this? Can I say this? Am I going to offend anyone? How will they receive this? And I remember having a talk with my back then mentor, and he said, Marie, it's all nice and beautiful what you do in there. It's all nice and fluffy, and people need all that love. But if you don't step up as a leader in that group, people don't know where to go. And I was like, wow, I changed that from one day to the next. People recognize the change very dramatically in a very positive way. And I was blown away what happened after then. I literally took on this, well, this is what people are here for. They need
Mm.
somebody to say this. They need somebody to talk about these things that nobody wants to talk about.
Mm.
That there is beauty in all of that, that there are hidden gifts, that there is hope, that there is
Mm.
joy, that there is
Mm.
all of that, as well as
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
sadness, the bitterness,
Mhm.
the hurt. It's not only ever just one thing,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
all about feeling all the feelings. Yet
Mm.
in our
Mhm.
culture, we are only trying to feel the sad feelings, the hurt, the bad feelings. I shouldn't call them bad feelings, but you know what I mean.
True. That's
The
true.
ones that really hurt, the suffering.
Mhm.
That's what our culture teaches us.
Mhm.
Yet
Mhm.
there are other cultures that celebrate the life of the loved one who has passed over and that go to town with making a point about how amazing this person was, and the whole family comes together and there are like days and weeks of celebration. We don't do that in our culture.
Mhm.
Yet it's all part of life. Death is part of life.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I changed that. I stepped up, and ever since, I have just learned to speak my truth quicker and faster and more direct, but still in
Mm.
a way
Mhm.
that I honor my truth. I don't do it to hurt people or to offend people or
Mhm.
to be standoffish. I
Mhm.
do it because I feel when I speak my truth, I give other people permission to do the same, and that's
Mhm.
important. That's what
Mhm.
people come to me for.
So, listeners, if you're observing, if you watch her state, just watch how she's strong. Like she says, I talk quickly, I I listen, and then I go. So it's like she's in tune, her heart and her spirit. Likely, she is.
Mm,
Ask yourself the question. I'm not going to say it. Ask yourself this: if you observe her, so if you're
yeah.
watching, watch her, or if you're listening, listen to her tone. Listen, she's both firm and soft, isn't she? At the same time, not either or, but same
Mm.
time. Owning her power, strong lady. I love
Thank
it.
you.
For me, it's all about strength. So good
Yeah.
job. Before we go on to asking things or talking about things like how are you able to love life after loss, I got a
Mm,
question for you. And I think many of us listeners are wanting to hear this. And that is, what did you do then? So that journey. So right when you came through or more, when you experienced the rawness of that moment,
mm,
what did you do then that you'd suggest no one do and why so? So this is not a life of regrets, but let's be honest, we learn
mm.
lessons. So you
Yeah,
look
yeah,
back
yeah,
and
yeah.
go,
No,
yeah, no,
absolutely.
this is something that I would never do. I would never suggest this.
Mm. This is a really tough question, and I'm super happy to answer that quite openly.
Mm,
Yet it's a tough one in such because everything that happened and that I did, even though things that I would probably recommend for others not to have to repeat that, and I will share that in a moment, led me to who I am and what I do now. So, there are no regrets in looking back that it did happen.
mm,
But one moment that jumped out instantly was, and to be honest, I don't know how I could have done it differently, but the moment that jumped out that I really wish people wouldn't have to experience was about a week after the funeral. So it was about 3 weeks after Rob's passing, because we had quite a bit of an extended time between his passing and the funeral. Um, yeah, because his body was in Perth and had to be repatriated, and it's just there's a lot that goes into that. So about a week after, I had a nervous breakdown, and
mm,
I still remember I was standing in the kitchen. I'm actually in my living room today. Usually I'm in my office when I do these interviews, and I'm looking at everything that I'm talking about. That's why I'm pointing
mm,
for those who are watching. So I was standing in my kitchen. My mum was here from overseas, and it was a very bizarre timing because my mum had already booked her flights to come
mm,
to my son's, to my little one's first Holy Communion. So when I told
mm,
her, she instantly wanted to bring her flights forward. And I said, no, don't, because I don't know what's going to happen in the next few days. I might have to fly to Perth, which I did. And, I don't know when I'm back. I don't know how long it takes. Just leave the flights because you'll be there, like, in time anyway. And it was perfect because it was literally 10 days later, she was here. So those 10 days were the flying back and forth, arranging, organizing. And she was here in perfect timing for the funeral, which was horrific when you think about it. And then 4 days later we had Jed's first Holy Communion. So within the same week, we laid Rob to rest, and I walked Jed down the aisle, and it was just intense. So as you can imagine, there were so many different emotions that I dealt with in that time, and having my mom here. At that time, I did not have a great relationship with my mom. There is a happy ending. We have got a fantastic relationship these days, but that's a completely different story. So at that time, it was intense for me, having her in my space that I didn't know how to protect anyway, and everything was raw. And the boys started fighting over toothpaste upstairs. And I remember calling out, it's like, boys, can you please get it together? And
mm,
then it came to the point where I called out again because, of course, they didn't listen. And I'm saying that, of course, because when you don't mean it, when you're not in the zone, it just goes in
mhm,
here and out there.
mhm, mhm,
So I said it again. And then all of a sudden, I called up and said, I just need peace and quiet.
mm,
And the moment I said that very sentence, it was like I had opened a valve
mm,
that I couldn't close anymore. I
mm.
started saying that sentence over and over and over,
Wow.
and I started yelling it, and I started shouting it, and I started screaming it. And then I was
Wow.
screaming it on top of my lungs till I just screamed, pitch tone. I just could not stop screaming. And at the same time, I collapsed to the floor. I was whacking kitchen cupboards. I was literally it was one of the most out of body experiences I have had in that
Mm,
time.
mm,
And it was literally like I was watching myself from up above, and I could not stop myself. And
mhm,
as I'm watching myself falling apart, I'm thinking, what are the neighbors going to do? Are they going to call police? Are they going to call an ambulance? Are they going to come and get me and put me in a psychiatric ward? What's going to happen to the kids? My mind was going a million miles an hour.
mm,
What if, what if, what if? And then everything was just peace and quiet. It's exactly that, what I screamed for. It was peace and quiet. Maybe not so peaceful upstairs, but in my mind, there was just all of a sudden there was peace. And then it hit me, and I thought, oh, the boys. Oh my God, how are the boys? Because I've got an open plan house here. They were
mhm,
upstairs. They would have heard everything like completely full force, no dampening through any doors.
mhm,
And I walked upstairs. Chet, my little one, was hiding under my blanket, and Flynn, my older one, was sitting on the side of the bed. And they both had this, just empty stare. And I just fell apart. I just felt like, oh my God, my heart was crumbling. And I had no words. I just sat
mm,
there with them. And then I looked at Jed, who came out under the blanket, and I just said, were you scared? And he just nodded. And I said, so was I. It was really, I said, it was so scary. And I told them what had happened. And I also told them how sorry I was that they had to experience that, because I really wanted to protect them from exactly that. But I couldn't in that very moment. I had nothing left. I had nothing left. And we had the most beautiful and most profound talk about what it takes to allow these things, what it takes to do something about it, what it takes to ask for help. And I said, I think I need help. I said, you know how you talk to your school counselor, Doreen, bless her. And they were like, yeah. I said, I think I need to talk to somebody too. And I did the next week. It was literally within 4 days. I had an appointment with the most beautiful positive psychologist. And I worked with her for 4 months straight, very intense. It was like a fast forward motion every time I met her, because with my background in mindset coaching and her, her background in positive psychology, the two of us together were just fast forward. And it was fast forward because my mind was wide open. My mind was wide open, and my heart as well. I just wanted her to help me find a way to deal with this. And yeah, so that was the beginning of my journey of doing something actively about it, and realizing more and more how I was dealing with it so differently, so open-minded. How can I create happiness? I don't want this to ever repeat itself.
So
And
what
it
in
never happened
specific?
again. It was
Yeah. So
amazing.
yeah. So what in specific would you suggest not to do? Because what I'm hearing you say, actually, and correct me if
Yeah,
I'm wrong, what I'm hearing you
yeah,
say is the thing to do is
yeah,
to process in real time. You gave
yeah.
your children a gift,
So
and then you went
yeah,
upstairs and you
absolutely.
said, "Mommy's in
Yeah,
pieces." And
yeah,
again, you said,
yeah,
"I need peace and I need quiet." So what you ask for and what you
yeah,
repeat and what you confirm in yourself, you did
yeah,
it over and over and over again, and all of a sudden it got
mm,
still. And again,
yeah,
when you say, I need peace, they say that
yeah,
beyond forgiveness, what our soul craves is peace, way beyond
mm.
forgiveness. The human, you
Oh,
and I,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah,
if I wrong you, you wrong me. Us humans, the way we
mm,
interact is I say, can you forgive me? And this is
mm,
how we do it. But they say in another
yeah,
dimension, some people call heaven or whatever that
yeah,
ends up being for people. But
mm,
in heaven or in that space, peace. We actually, our soul craves
yeah,
peace. And so peace
yeah,
is beyond. So perhaps you are going beyond forgiving yourself. Perhaps you're thinking,
mm,
how was I to blame? Where am I responsible for
mm,
this? And also you're going,
yeah,
actually, I just need peace and quiet. And you kept saying it, right? And so it's a
yeah,
beautiful thing. So yeah, I
yeah,
just want to like commend you for that raw, rich processing time. It's interesting. Sometimes I
mm,
wonder, like, even for myself, I don't take stock of where perhaps it could have gone a whole bunch worse. Meaning, how was
mm,
maybe what happened there unfolding you in public
yeah,
in front of them? That
yeah,
was the beingness that was actually required
yeah,
for their emotional evolution to deal with this. But
yeah.
back to the piece, right? So what would you suggest don't do this, people? I did this, don't do it.
So yeah, no, I totally agree. And this is why I said, when you asked me that question, there's really nothing that I regret, because it led me to
Hmm.
where I am today.
Hmm.
However, if there's something that I could
Hmm.
prevent people from to go through, it was this whole idea of how it happened, how I fell apart, and how out of control I felt, and how what vehemence that had on my boys, that feeling. I would have loved to protect them from that force that it came out with.
Mm,
However, I
mm,
don't know how I could have prevented it. I really don't. And in hindsight, about 2 days later, I think, I can't tell you anymore now, but it was within 1 to 3 days later.
mhm,
One of my sons had a very similar breakdown, falling apart, falling to pieces, screaming, pushing around him, and I had to sit with my other son and say, "Remember when this happened to me? Please don't take it personal. It's
mhm,
not directed towards you.
mhm,
It's just because he didn't know how to deal with it,
mhm,
and it feels horrible." So because of I had gone through it, and we had this conversation about how helpless I felt in that moment, and didn't know how to avoid that, and how horrible I felt that it affected them. I could explain, see,
mhm,
it's something that happens with you, and it's not personal. And that was the most
mhm,
important part. He felt so destroyed because it was directed
mhm.
at him, but it was not intentionally. Do you know what I mean?
S-
So I had this as an example to say, do not take it on. This was
So
his way of not
so
knowing
would
how
you
to deal
say
with it.
would you say if you could do that part again, you would say don't
Yeah.
label all of that as bad. meaning
Yeah.
let it be something. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard there's this healing modality called TRE, and TRE is basically just where your body goes into shake mode. And so there's a
Hmm.
practitioner who lives near where we live
Yeah.
here, and he
Yeah.
practices TRE. And so he came over, and
Yeah.
I was friends with him, and he came over. He did this session with me, and I'm like, "Oh, this is interesting."
Mm.
I thought, "What is this all about?" Like,
Yeah.
your muscles basically fatigue, and then it starts shaking. And the
Yeah.
whole concept is back in the day when Lebanon was getting bombed.
Hmm.
There was a psychiatrist or psychologist, one of the two, walking down the street, and bombs were falling, and he noticed that
Hmm.
parents were sitting on the front step of their house, and they'd
Hmm.
hold their children and they'd say, "Don't worry, don't shake, you're okay." But when
Mm.
the parent wasn't holding the child was just shaking. It's like a dog. When a dog processes, it just shakes.
Mm.
It shakes it off and walks
Mm.
away. So it's
Mm.
like the human needs time to process. So it's a little bit like
Mm.
the healthiest, what he came to the appreciation of. A human has to do something. There has to be a response. Yours, like you say, I get it. It was explosive. You would have wished your boys
Mm.
had seen, because
Yeah.
at that level of influence, that young age, that's quite abrupt for them. So I totally appreciate that, right? But no, I love that.
It was
I love that.
scary. Yeah.
Yeah. So moving
Mm.
on, I want to ask you, how are you able, and I love this so much because you and I, we have designed, we have worked our asses off to design our life for
Mm.
gratitude, not hyperbole, but it is
Mm.
just actually not in spite of things that happen, but because of things. So for me, I have an unshakable enjoyment and life, or love with life. I love it. And so how are you able
Mm.
to love life after loss? And of course, your loss is different than mine. I didn't lose a spouse. I lost
Yeah.
myself, but
Yeah.
I'm still here. So it's
Yeah.
different, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. My instant reaction when you ask me that is, how can you not? Life is
Mm,
such a gift. And I often say, picture this,
mm,
um, my life before Rob passed.
mm,
And I think about all the joys that I had before,
mm,
with him, without him, next to him, through him, despite of him. That sounds horrible when I say it that way. I didn't mean it that way, but you know what I mean. It's just all the joys and lovely things and happiness that you have in your life before somebody
mm,
passes.
mm, mhm,
And then somebody passes, or is through other circumstances not in your life anymore.
mm, mm,
All the other joys don't drop away. They're
mm,
still there.
mhm,
We often tend to stare at the closed door for so long, because
mm,
that's what society teaches us,
mm, mm,
that we don't see all the other joys around us anymore.
mm,
Yet
mm,
it doesn't change that life is freaking beautiful. It is just so
mm,
amazing. It is such a miracle.
mm,
It is such a
mm,
gift that doesn't change when somebody passes. It
mm,
might cloud
mm,
your perspective or your vision
mm,
for a little bit, but a mountain that you look at is incredibly beautiful, no matter whether it's covered in clouds or not.
mm,
So that's just fact. Life is beautiful. And for us, there's a little exercise that I often do when people don't know how to get started.
mm,
I always recommend, as a very, very first step when somebody dies in your life, that I say, separate who you have lost from what you have lost. It really is so
mm.
important, because for me, there were things like, okay,
That's very
what
helpful.
have I
That's
lost
very
with
helpful.
Rob?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was that I'm feeling safe, I'm feeling protected, things like that. I feel loved and adored, like things like, um, what was it that really connected us so deeply? And I looked at that and I wrote down a list. And then I looked at the list, and I make a very big point here. This is not about replacing someone in your
Mhm,
life at all. But I
mhm,
looked at the list, and this is when you step into creation. This is really when you need to be creative and you're like, okay, how can I recreate this for myself? It will very often be in a very different form, in a different shape, in a different way. For me, things like feeling safe meant I pushed my bed into one corner because I felt like more cradled in and I felt safer. I did things like checking the front and back door before I went to bed, so I didn't have to worry about, or what if, is there somebody coming in? I mean, we live in such a safe neighborhood. Our house is surrounded by six other houses, and there's glass front doors everywhere. So I see glass and nature everywhere I
mhm,
look. And I felt I was safe. Okay, no, my brain knew I was safe and I didn't feel it. So I had to recreate that feeling. And that,
Mhm.
came with all these little things. And then love, of course, having somebody to love you so deeply. I needed to rely so much more on all the other love, and putting that
Mhm.
under quotation marks, because
Mhm.
love comes in so many different shapes and forms.
Mhm.
And for me, love is two things. Love is like an eternal power source that I can tap into at any given time. And also, love just wants you to be happy. It's that simple. Love wants you to be happy. So if that was Rob, if that was me who passes, we both knew if something was ever to happen to us, we want the other person to take the boys and create the happiest life ever. We talked about that.
Mhm.
Of course, there was theory,
Mhm.
but that doesn't change when all of a sudden it's reality. That's when it comes to fruition. That's when it's required to be put into action. And I knew that instantly. I knew that was my call right now. I need to create a happy life for the boys and myself. I owe
It,
that to Rob, because
isn't it
that's love.
interesting? Isn't it interesting how a human can take literally anything and let it
Mm,
expand and let it become into what it's always wanted to? Listeners, you're
yeah.
probably picking this up. She had the love of her life. This person was gone. And what she said is, listen, how can the fact that he's gone and the values that we enjoy together, how can this now expand into all things? And so she let
Yeah.
him become
Oh, I
the
love it.
firecracker is like
The
boom, and it
goosebumps
just
when I hear that back.
it went everywhere. It surged through her
Yeah,
veins and it just hit every
exactly.
orifice. When she saw a
Yeah.
flower, when she appreciated her house, it kind of brings me. I
Mm.
watched your TED talk. So you have this
You
wonderful
did?
TED talk.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. Yeah. So your TED Talk's called
Yeah,
Redefining Our Image of a Widow. And there's a part in there
yeah.
that I especially love where you said, what I see. So you're talking about grief and about widows and loss. What you said is,
Mm,
what I see is enormous strength, depth,
mm.
ancient wisdom coming forth to guide her. Right. And so,
It
listeners,
is
whether
so
you're
beautiful. It's the first time
right,
I hear somebody say that back to me. I'm like, "Woo, I'm so proud." Thank
yeah, you
you.
should
Thank you
be.
for
Yeah.
watching
Yeah.
my
So listen.
TEDx talk.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you that haven't seen it, I encourage you to go see it. It's a wonderful
Mm,
little. I'm going to
thank
send
you.
this to my aunt today because she's kind of,
Beautiful.
there's these
Thank
five
you.
stages of grief, and we want to help people. And I love what you're doing with your concept. So beautiful, right? You're actually helping people process, not get stuck.
Yeah,
Keep the thing moving. Keep the thing moving.
yeah,
Keep the thing moving. Don't worry if you're not progressing fast enough, but you got to keep moving. And
yeah.
when you do, it's like, so whether you identify here on this call for the listeners as
Mm,
a woman or male,
yeah,
this talk will benefit you. So change the widow thing
yeah.
to like the other part. I don't know what the other
Widower.
thing is. Yeah, widower. Totally, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, you wanted to say something. I can see some
I
bubbling up.
need to say something, because as soon as you said 5 stages of grief, I was like, oh. So this is one of the biggest myths. I literally just did a talk about that this week,
Mm,
about the myth, like some hidden myths or some obvious myths about grief. And one of them is the 5 stages of grief. Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who's quite renowned in that field of grief, who where that originated from, those 5 stages of grief, big quotation marks, were actually 5 stages of terminally ill people. And
mm,
somehow along the way, it got lost in translation and people started to apply it as stages of grief, and they are not. And I'm saying that, and I always want to highlight that because I get asked at least every second interview, it comes up as a topic. I want you to think about this. When you think about things like anger, bargaining, denial, they all apply to terminally ill people.
mm,
That bargaining, the denial, no, this can't happen to me. It's got nothing to do with grief.
mhm,
And people try to put that into a cookie cutter thing due to the lack of words and labels for grief, because nobody knows how to describe it, how to label it. And as a society, we're always looking for labels. We're always looking to describe things, to have like a go-to approach. It's not a go-to approach. Please don't succumb to this whole, oh, I need to go to the
mm,
5 stages of grief. I never had any anger. I was not bargaining. I was definitely not in denial. Shock, yeah, probably. Yet it
mhm,
didn't come like as a stage of grief. Well,
mm,
who wouldn't be shocked if they would receive a phone call that your husband has just passed in the prime of
mm,
his life, completely healthy? You know,
mhm,
it's one of those things where I'm like, I am highly alert when people start with labels, and
mm,
I'm the first person to say, can you try not to use those labels and see what do you need right now? What is it
mm,
that you need? Just
mhm,
listen to that. Stop listening
mhm,
to society and what they're trying to suggest that you deal with it, because has it helped anyone? Unfortunately not. It
mm,
does the opposite. It keeps people stuck in grief, in the suffering, in the hurt. And I'm like, if you were to manage, and this is what my whole life work is all about, if you manage to shift your perspective and think about how can I allow joy back in? How can I create happiness? How can I tap into these power source of love? Grief doesn't go away. It happens
mhm,
along the way, yet my focus is now on the healing.
mhm,
If I think
mhm.
about how can I grieve best and how can I do this better, and then my focus stays on the pain, on the suffering, on the
Mm.
grief. So
You know,
it's
that's an interesting
literally a
concept.
perspective shift.
Yeah, yeah, no, I totally get it.
Yeah.
And I like your take on it. I'll have to chew on that a little bit. I'm just looking here.
Mm.
So I just grabbed my phone because I sent this to my mom yesterday about the five stages of grief. And so the five stages, for those of you that don't know, the first stage is denial. And so in denial, often there's avoidance, there's confusion, there's
Mm.
elation, there's
Mhm.
shock, and there's
Mhm.
fears. And so we start kind of at this level, for example, emotionally,
Mhm.
and then we go up a little bit because maybe the shock and elation kind of
Just
goes, oh,
1 second. Everybody listening to this, I want you to now apply this filter of what if that was for terminally ill
yeah,
people and not for people grieving. Go
yeah.
on.
Yeah. So exactly, do that for those of you
Yeah.
that are listening. And at the same
Mm.
time, I want for those of you that where it's worked, ask yourself, how has it worked? Because this has worked for me, but I need to chew on what
Yeah.
you're talking about. So that's the
Mhm.
nine. You start emotionally over here. You go up a little bit, and then you start coming down, and you go into anger. And so you
Mm.
move into frustration,
Mm.
irritation, and anxiety. And exactly like Marie was saying, for those of you who have a terminal illness, ask yourself, how does that apply to me? And also for those of
Mm.
you who have done this and it's worked, ask yourself, how did it work? But
Mm.
just stay open. Just stay open to everything.
Yeah.
Then you go
Mm.
further down and you go into sadness and loss and depression. So you're at the base. So you're emotional, you're kind of at the bottom. And of course,
Mm.
if you are sad too long, now you're in a depressed state. And now you're in a stuck state, because depressed state is
Mm.
something that you often do. It's less of what you get. It's more of what you choose to do.
Mm.
From there, you move up and you go to bargaining. So now you're kind of at a little bit lower than you were originally when you're at denial, but you go
Mm.
at the bargaining. So exactly like you're saying, Marie. And then
Mm.
and bargaining, of course, is just struggling to find meaning and reaching out to others. And you're telling your story, basically, is what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're trying to justify, you're trying to figure this out. You're saying, why did it happen? You're asking the why question, why? And why
Mm.
doesn't really help much. So what you realize, you get
Mm.
sick and tired of that one, and you go up, and then you accept. And often when we accept, we explore options. So we, instead of going why, we ask what. What is this for? What
Yeah.
is this for? What is this for? What is this for? And so for me,
Yeah.
the reason it worked out for me is, for me, it was for a new plan and a new place. And it's moving on so that
Mhm.
ultimately I got to create something new. So for me, the five grief,
Mm.
it all, this channel allowed me. So because of it, I could see how there's purpose. But
Mm.
based on what you're saying, that's a very interesting take, because at the root,
Mhm.
I love what you're bringing up, because at the root of many modalities, if we don't stress test it, lies
Mm.
antiquated, or perhaps just, and not even that people are trying to like conspire against us. It's just that the
Yeah.
nuanced thinking, what you're bringing, hasn't come forward. So
Mm.
what I love to see you work on is actually put into flow something for people that
Mm.
would actually be a better version. I would love to see that at some point in time.
I
So
already have
that's
that.
super
I
fun.
already
That's super
have
fun.
the 7 stages to get through. So don't put
I
me
love
on the spot to rehearse them now. But I do
it's over
talk.
good.
I do talk about them. I've actually developed a journey that I call From Grief to Relief, and they are my
Mm,
first 7 steps to get
mm,
out of grief.
mm,
And
mhm,
literally, and the first one I have already shared. How can you
mhm,
separate who you've lost from what you've lost? But I
mhm,
want to quickly backtrack and say one more thing to these
mhm.
labels, and then I'd really
Please.
like to move away from them
Yeah.
because they're
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
so not. But
Yeah.
anyway, no, I'm glad you brought
Yeah.
it up because I think it's a
Yeah.
very important thing for people to
Mhm,
think about and reconsider. What if I don't have those 5 stages and they don't actually apply? Ooh, what else do I
mm,
do with it?
mm,
Maybe I find a healthier version. Good point.
mhm. Love
So
it.
one
Yep.
of them, what you just said, anger. I always want to make a point about that as well when the word anger comes up, because I always call anger a cover up emotion. So anger is always something that is covering up another emotion that is too intense to feel. And anger is so much easier to feel. It bursts out, it comes out, it covers up things. Yet when you allow yourself to release it, ideally in a healthier way than me falling apart, and it's probably not anger, that was more frustration or whatever. But I'm saying, when you allow yourself to release anger in a hopefully healthy way, then you get to the point where, like, what is the emotion underneath? And that can be grief, that can be sadness, that can be frustration, that can be anything and everything.
Mhm.
Yet we cannot see it until we let go of the anger. And often that is a shortcut for those who do a lot of self-development work and a lot of work on themselves. Once we realize that anger is just a cover-up emotion, often it becomes so much easier and quicker to move away from it and go like, okay, hold on,
I
it's
love it
just trying to
because
deny me
because
some access to what I really need to see.
because what we all want more of is more love. We want to receive and give more love. So love stands here, sadness
Mm,
stands here, anger stands here. So one
yeah.
notch away from love is sadness. So anger, the
Mm,
purpose, and you know what I love about all
love it.
emotions? They're all safe.
Yeah.
All emotions are
Yeah,
safe
absolutely.
when all
Mm,
of our emotions point to something we could do next.
yes.
There's this like a scripture that somebody sent me a little while ago that
Brilliant.
says, "Be angry and sin not." It doesn't say don't be angry. It says
Mm,
be angry and sin not. So all emotions are actually safe,
yeah.
provided they're arrows that point us to another
Yeah.
healthy action that we could take that's going to help
Yeah.
us and others. Because ultimately, we're all
This
feeling
is
something,
brilliant. I love it.
and
Yeah.
instead of like eliminating a bunch of this stuff, we're like, let's bring in anyway.
Mm.
Moving on, let's talk about healing a little bit. And so
Sure.
what I happen to
My
know,
favorite topic.
yeah, and you've done more of that. Yet I'll say
Yeah.
this: when I was and it wasn't a drunken stupor, but I did check out of life for like 3 years. I was basically laying down in my
Mm,
bedroom. I was depressed out of my mind, and it
mhm,
was it was a self-induced state of suffering. Let's be honest. Yeah, there's situations that
mm,
happen. My son had been tested with autism, and of course, what do I do with this? Plus, what do I do with the creative
mhm,
brain that I am, or all this stuff going
mhm,
on? It's like fireworks constantly. So you have all these things going on. But at the base of it all, one of the ways that I would language things is unless we heal and take forward action that
mm,
benefits us for both the short and long term, the opposite is we'll only ever push it if we don't take the forward action that's beneficial. We'll do the opposite, which is to push down and repress,
mm.
and it will likely
Yeah.
appear in the future of our lives and probably
Yeah.
at the least desirable time. So that's
Yeah.
kind of my little version. Give us your version, the do's and the don'ts. And I hate to like reduce it down. I'm not a reductionist, but for
Mm,
simplicity, when you think healing, what are some things to do? What are some things to don't? Like
mm.
go here and don't go there.
Yeah. I have a shortcut question for that. And
Please.
this comes with a huge, huge disclaimer, because it takes a lot of work to get to that.
Hmm,
But because we have such short time here together, I want to gift you that shortcut version.
hmm,
And I want to say this, it's so, so important to understand that it takes work to get to this question, and that I strongly recommend that you do the work when you can use this question safely. Because when you don't do the work, this question comes like a massive slap in the face. And I needed to say that
hmm.
disclaimer because it is very confronting. And that is, and I'm saying that with the words of Rodolfo Di Angeli, an absolutely beautiful friend of mine. And he said to me, um,
Well, firstly, let me
how
say
can
it
I
that
look at
way.
this? Yeah,
Firstly, his name and the way you pronounced it.
yeah.
I want to believe that what you're saying is going to be beautiful because that name is that.
He's absolutely beautiful. He doesn't even know I'm quoting him here, but I will let him know. So this is this whole concept of how is this the most beautiful thing that happened for me right now?
Hmm,
And that can be such a slap in the face for people who have just lost someone very close
hmm,
to you. And then you ask them, how can this be the most beautiful thing for you? See that shortcut, how that can feel like, a stab right into your
hmm,
heart or a slap in the face when you don't do the work in between that gets you to the point where you can use this question safely. And the reason why I'm saying that with such a big disclaimer, because I can fully understand that a lot of people go like, switch off, I'm not going to listen to this. She's absolutely nuts. How can this be something that happened for me? However, in all my work that I do, I always work with, I call it the hidden gifts in adversity. And it does require different steps to get to the level where you can actually allow them in, find them, and unwrap them, and then use them. It takes work to get there. It's
and let me
the
guess,
sixth step in my 7-step process. So it takes all the other steps to actually get to the point where you can see the hidden gifts in adversity.
and let me guess, the gifts, which we're going to get to in a little bit, the gifts of adversity, let me guess, those come when you focus on, how would I say this? Supporting yourself by helping other people in their problems and hoping that, no, they don't come when we focus on other people. They come when we focus on our own journey, right? The gifts and these polarities, what does it actually mean? Right? What does it mean inside of us? Anyway, hey, thank you for that. And yeah, like you say, for sheer timing, that'll take a little longer to unpack. There's a specific part in healing in your TEDx talk where, and again, in your TEDx talk, it's just called Redefining Our Image of the Widow. There's a spot where you said, we've been shown that the amount of love has to equal the grief that we portray. And that was such a truth bomb. I mean, you talking about, like, you were just challenging the old, like, 5 stages of grief. And you're saying, actually, we need to up level, we need to make new the antiquated definitions of certain things, right? And it's like, wait a minute, I'll say it again. We've been shown that the amount of love, so when we lose someone, we've been shown that the amount of love has to equal the grief that and it's like, that's how apparently we're supposed to show society that we loved her.
That's what society teaches us,
right? Yeah, go ahead. So how would you make new that? How would you take an antiquated concept and be like, we got to move this? How would you redefine that?
Yeah. I can actually rephrase that with another question that just came to me when you asked me that. And it's really beautiful because, you know, how I said to you, I did the talk at the beginning of the week saying 2 common myths in grief. That was the second one that I addressed, you know, that we have to portray our grief with the same, heaviness or same weight of the love that we have for the person. And I don't agree with that. So obviously my question to rephrase that would be, and I love this. I need to write this down. I'm going to watch this back later and write it down because it literally just came to me when you asked me that. So I love it. So my question is, how would it make your loved one feel if you were to portray the amount of grief that you feel for that person with an equivalent amount of happiness and joy for life? If the joy and happiness for life equals the amount of love that you have for that person, how would it make that person feel?
That's a
Spoiler
fascinating
alert, they would burst with joy. Like, seriously.
100%. That's a reframe, because if you think about it, listener, consider this. Marie, consider this. I'm considering this. Who are we at our highest state? Finite beings or infinite? If you would have asked Rob that question, he would have been like, do I want you to walk around grief for all your life and have this at the center? Or do I want you to celebrate? Like, why when we have funerals, do we have like celebrations of life? It's a reframe that embodies grief. It doesn't like not deal with grief. But I love that. So that is just so good.
Thank you. So I
good.
actually did another talk on role reversal. You know, if I was in Rob's shoes, and I could feel so much joy, like literally I could feel so much joy sitting in his presence and looking at me and the boys from his perspective. It was incredible. And that's actually my final step of these 7 steps from grief to relief is the role reversal. And it takes a lot more than just that, but there's a really beautiful exercise that comes with that. It's incredible. So yeah, I see it as such a gift to shift my perspective, to look at all of that in that way that I do now. You know, like I really needed to move away from society's expectations. It was it was killing me, literally.
Mhm,
I just
mhm.
couldn't be there. I knew that I had to be somewhere way more productive and open-minded and sitting in joy for the boys. They needed it and I needed it. So yeah.
And who doesn't have the desire, the soulful desire to bring impact? Who likes to think they're taking up
Yeah.
space? Who likes to think they're not being of benefit? Nobody does.
Mm,
So
yeah.
if Rob knew, would have known, which he likely did because you're a smart woman, he aligned with somebody smart.
Mm,
Listen, he says, listen, do I want the gift of what I've created with money myself? I'm a hot mess, he's probably thinking. I'm this and that and everything. I'm all things, but do I want the gifts of who I am to die? Of course, maybe he wants to leave a legacy. I think leaving a
mm,
legacy, it's a little bit like this, the infinite. Now Rob
mm.
isn't everything that you see. You see Rob in everything, yet
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
detached the person, but you have the
Mm,
value of Rob. So Rob goes, that's always what I
mm.
did. I live my behaviors,
Yeah.
I live my values. My behaviors led you to understand that those were my values, because that's truly how you see who
Mm,
somebody actually is. And now what you do is
mm.
you literally bring that everywhere. So it's like he is ever present. He's infinite. Yet you have
Yeah.
found a way to not, when you see a flower, break down and cry because he isn't with you anymore. What you know what I'm saying?
Mm.
It's completely a different thing. I love it. You just shattered
Yeah.
that. It's a beautiful thing. Moving on to
Thank you.
happiness. Let's move there.
Yeah.
Some say happiness is rather shallow and fleeting, and joy is
Mm,
a lasting one and the infinite. Okay, speaking of infinite,
mm.
some people go, happiness, man, it's fleeting. Joy is
Yeah.
the best one. Talk to me.
Mm,
What have you learned about? Because I know we've talked a bit about happiness and love and joy,
mm.
and you have a
Yeah.
strong attraction towards happiness. Some people go like, yeah, that's
Mm,
shallow. And
yeah.
I love your take on it, but talk to me. What have you learned about happiness that has shaped you and your view of this this happy drug word that many people use? Like some people in
Mm,
society say, stop using it, it's not helpful. However, you
mm.
still say it's helpful. Go ahead.
Yeah. So for me, it's obviously I understand that everybody needs a process to get there. That's why I put all these disclaimers out there when I get you the end version or the solution or a solution
Mm,
too early, because I
mhm,
understand that it's a process. It's a step-by-step process. And I did not get that phone call from the sergeant from the coroner's office and then go like, hey boys, come on, let's do something that makes us happy. It's
mm,
not
mm,
possible like
mm,
that. You
mhm,
don't flick the switch like that. Yet something inside of me instantly knew that that had to be my focus. That doesn't mean that I can be like that I can be happy or joyful instantly.
mm,
It's a
mm,
process, it's a journey. And that's why I always talk about the path and the healing journey, because it's not one step and you're there. It's lots and lots of
mm,
little steps. And sometimes you slip a bit, and sometimes you even go a couple of steps backwards because you saw that amazing tree that had a really beautiful message for you and you want to go back and hug that tree. It's
mhm,
just something where I'm like, a journey is not always straight, a path is not always straight, it's not always upwards or downwards, it's all over the place. And there are crossroads. And, Rob always talked to me about choices in life, that he was the one who taught me that concept of choices, not me, not Mrs. Self Development. It was my husband who taught me that way
mm,
before I delved into self development.
mm,
And he always said to me, you've got two choices. You're going to focus on the happiness or on the negativity. It's really like when I did the eulogy for Rob, I knew it had to be so much more than just the eulogy. I put together a speech on love and connection. And
mm,
I just wanted people that were there to take something really
mm, mm,
important with them when they
mm,
walked out. I stood on stage and talked to 500 plus people about love and connection. There were jokes, there was laughter, there were tears, because I knew that's what Rob was all about. He was about jokes and laughter and love and connection. That was his highest value, was love and connection, and his family, and I needed people to take that away with them. The amount of people that came to me at the wake and then weeks and months after that said what profound changes they had made in their lives based on
mhm,
that speech. And that speech was not about me, that was us.
mm,
I loved it. I loved what an impact Rob or the two of us had on so many people in this life, because we made our choices daily. And I was really lucky. I have to tell you this. I was super lucky that, and this is another hidden gift in adversity, I have to say. I was lucky that Rob and I lived a life of no regrets. So I didn't end up going like, I wish I would have said that to him. I wish I would have done that. I wish I would have. Do I wish that we had more time? I think we always do that. No matter how old we get in life, we always wish we had one more day or one more, whatever.
Mhm.
But it wasn't about that. It was the fact that I knew when Rob passed, there was nothing left unsaid. He knew how much I loved him. He knew how wanted he was in our lives. He knew what an impact he had. He knew what an amazing dad he was, what an incredible husband he was. He knew all of that. I never let anything be unsaid. And that is a gift that I received in my dad's passing when I was 20, because I felt like I wish I would have said that. I wish I would have done that. And I promised myself back then that I'll never, ever leave anything unsaid or undone. When I feel something for a person, I feel that person needs to know, in particular when it's positive, I say it. I sometimes, people go like, whoa, wow, thank you. And I'm like, yeah, you're welcome. For me, it's so normal. My boys, like, ask them when we walk around the street. It's like they're so used to me stopping at people that I don't even know and telling them that dress is so beautiful. It really brings out your eyes. And I walk on and they go like, thank you. It's like I do it all the time because I'm like, life's so short to not say things when they're
And let me
beautiful.
guess,
So
it's not willpower. It's just of you. And when you process things well, that's what happens. That's what happens when you
yeah,
process things well and you deal with things as they happen. By the way,
yeah,
next best time to deal with things, if you didn't deal with them when they happen, is now. So for any
now,
of you
yeah,
that say, "Oh, well, yeah, I'm not so fortunate," well,
yeah.
that's no problem. You just start dealing with it
You
now.
always
Because
have
if
now.
not, you're kicking
You
it down the
always
can,
have
and
now.
your children will just
Mm,
have you do this and kick the can further down to them. What I find really
mm,
interesting. So I'm just listening to your story, and I find so again, just on the play, on society says happiness is kind of junkish. They're like, yeah, I'm not quite sure about
mm,
this. And it's interesting,
mm,
your experience with Rob and your journey, your relation, and how it all ended. You actually have an anchor. You're saying, hey, world, let's not forget happiness. Because what's
mm,
fascinating, think about how it leads the world forward. Old words that maybe aren't understood well, or maybe we just have a new
mm,
experience. Meaning, the way what I'm
mm,
picking up from you is that happiness is what we get to do when we make choices. Do we want to be
mm,
grumpy or do we want to be happy?
mm,
And so choices we get to make in the state of being happy. Now, let's see if joy
mm,
comes, but if we're giving yourself a great chance, a probability, not
mm.
just a possibility,
Yeah,
when we make choices that we go, they fuel us for happiness. Why would we not?
yeah,
And so you're
yeah,
literally anchoring to a specific word that society probably says, let's move it aside. It's not really for elevation. You're going, whoa, whoa, whoa. In order to make choices, think about this. Think about this happy
mm,
thing, and you're bringing it right back to the center. And again, this is how you this is how you continue the legacy
yeah,
of Rob, right? You're going, actually, let's not
mm,
forget, this is sacred. This word is beautiful. I love it.
yeah,
I love it.
yeah,
So nice. So
absolutely. Thank you.
yeah. So moving on to joy, I know, and when you and I talked earlier, one of the things that we had a good chuckle about is, some people they sell books like a 12-step plan for this or a 7-step plan for this, and I said the
Mhm,
5-step before, and typically we were just laughing about the 4, 5, 6 for 3-step thing.
mm.
Why do you think so when it comes to joy? Why does a 4 or 5-step plan in joy not work? Like, why does it just not work? Like, if when you consider designing
Oh,
your life is
wow.
pretty intricate work. Like, it's pretty, everybody can do it. But here's the thing, a 4 or 5-step plan, is it like this formula that apparently we plug
Mm,
in and hit the calculator and go equals that? Here it is.
yeah.
Well, we know it's not, but why does it not work?
I think I think I want to challenge you on that. Why wouldn't a 4 or 5 step plan to joy work? It so depends on where you start. You might be at the space in your life where you've done 700
Mhm,
different steps
mhm,
already in different
mhm,
self-development journeys,
mhm,
in different adversities in your life. You might have evolved already to a level where
mhm,
a 4 or 5 step plan would work for you. Why
mhm,
not? I don't think we need to get hung up around how many steps or how many choices it takes to
there
get
you
to
go.
that. For me, it is super simple. Happiness is a choice. Healing is a choice. You just got to make those choices. And that just is not as simple as Nike puts it. I totally get that. Yet it is a choice. And we need to remind ourselves that we do have choices. And often I get thrown that question at me where I go like, well, Marie, I didn't choose to lose my husband. And I'm like, well, On a very spiritual level, I believe we do, but let's just put that completely aside because I understand that everybody has got very different understandings of spirituality, different beliefs, different all of that. And that's okay. My understanding
Mhm,
from a spiritual level is that Rob and I have
mhm,
chosen that.
mhm, mhm,
However, as I said, let's put that aside. You still have the choice how you respond to it. And this is what we often forget. We get
mhm,
hung up on the belief, I'll put it out there as such, the belief that I haven't chosen for my husband to die, yet we forget that we have the choice of how do I respond to it.
mhm,
Do I go down that cookie cutter approach of where society wants to
mhm,
squeeze us into and it just doesn't fit? And that causes pain and we'll experience it when we try it. Or do I go a different approach that might offend some people, that might get them to roll your eyes at you or say mean things about you, whatever. I was very lucky that I got hardly any of that. And create something new, create a different shift in perspective where I go like, you know what? There is so much joy in all of that. And yes, it is a process to get there. It's not going to be a flick the switch and tomorrow I'll experience joy. It's not going to happen like that. Yet the direction can happen like that with one decision. With this is going to be my focus and I will get there. It's like buying a ticket to Rome. I'm not going to be there in a second. It takes like 20 hours to fly there, but the direction is chosen. I want a ticket to Rome. I don't know why I chose Rome. It just came up, but you know what I
yeah.
mean?
So what we're talking
Yeah.
about here is we're building tension. The audience is feeling this. So I was just sharing
Mm.
how when you and I were talking earlier, why do these things not work? We're laughing why they don't work. My
Yeah.
listeners, our listeners are now picking up and you're saying, well, I like to challenge you. Maybe they work. So the listener,
Mm.
like you and I, we're feeling tension. So we can either feel like it's warring
Mm.
tension, like conflict, but if you're
Mm.
observing, this is actually helping us evolve the narration forward. And so
Mm.
what Marie and I, what I like so much about her is she's a non-dual human, meaning she's not considering this is right and that's wrong. She doesn't have to make
Mm.
one wrong to have one other one right. So in some cases, she says, listen, it might not be overtly beneficial, but she says, actually, if somebody can find benefit from a 5-step plan, why would it not work?
Mm.
What?
Yeah.
So for the listeners, you guys are sitting here going, which one do I choose? Which
Mhm.
one do I choose? And that's the tension to lead into. And we're gonna talk about that in just a second because we're moving on to gifts and adversity. And I'm going to
Mhm.
talk about
Mm.
what I believe a win and a loss actually is. It's tension. It's not conflict. It's tension. It's fuel giving. It's
Yeah.
life giving, right? But before we do that, in relation to joy, and in relation to you designing your life, and I can just relate to my experience when I redesigned my life. And so the last
Mm.
decade has been a decade of learning how to really go deep into gratitude. And I'm going to take
Mm.
another decade to do it, just go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. Like that's just my life,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
And so what do you think is pivotally important when it comes to designing your life? Meaning,
Mhm.
like how to appreciate the daily consistent efforts, perhaps, versus
Mm.
I don't know, maybe some people say, well, I'm trying to be appreciating my efforts. However, I'm fighting that
Mm.
old discontentment valve or that musculature that
Mm.
says we're not progressing fast enough. So, in relation to joy
Mm.
and designing life, what's pivotally important when it comes to designing your life? Like, what are the things to
Mm.
really focus on? Because designing your life, it's a lot of work, and it takes
Yeah.
intention, it takes commitment, and it takes focus on
Yeah.
yourself and taking everything in. Go ahead.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah. Intention, commitment, two major keywords. And I love that you say that already. It really takes intention. And that brings us back to choices. What is my choice? What is my intention? What
Mm-hmm.
do I choose to do to move forward? And
Hmm.
my intention, my choice was instantly, okay, I'm moving towards happiness. No matter what, if it's the tiny little steps, if it's the big steps, here's the thing. I haven't shared that often. Actually, I often talk about that we've done it, but not why. Rob and I had actually planned to take the entire 2019 off and travel around the world with the boys and homeschool them. That was our plan. And then he passed in June 2018, so it never happened. But when I look upstairs, my wardrobe is full of images from our itinerary. We had the entire
Wow.
itinerary standing where we wanted to start through South America, then through Europe, back through Asia. We wanted to have an entire year of endless summer, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And when Rob passed, I instantly knew there's no way I could do this on my own. And especially not South America with two boys that are 10 and 8 as a woman on my own, no way. So rather than looking at, oh my God, am I going to be able to do this without Rob? I was like, hey, how can I do this with the boys? What can I do? How long can I go? And I booked a 2 months flight around the world with the boys. And we traveled extremely well together. Loved it. We did that. And it was an intentional choice to create new happy memories and to do it despite Rob not being there. So I instantly looked at, how can I do it, rather than, oh boy, I can't do that without Rob. And yeah, no way that I would have homeschooled 2 boys for an entire year while going through a grieving process. No, that's not going to work. I thought, what is going to work for me? So I did that, and it was an incredible experience, something that we still build on and talk about almost 4 years later. You know, it was really an important journey for us to do that, to make a conscious choice of happiness. That was so freaking joyful to travel around the world for 2 months, you know, and do all the things. You know, Clint's like, can we go and eat escargot in Paris? And I'm like, let's do it. So we went to Paris and ate escargot. I will never, ever, ever do that again in my life. I can promise you that. It was a mind over matter thing. But anyway, I'm getting completely sidetracked here. It is the intention, the choices that we make step by step. And rather than constantly getting hung up on the side steps, the backward steps, that didn't work, or that wave hit me and I hit rock bottom again. Everything where you feel that it's a step backwards, that it, you know, you hit rock bottom again, is temporary.
Isn't it fascinating when we really observe life and let life serve us for all the good that it is? A word like "we did this in spite of" changes to "we got to do the things because of." Think about, where did you get all the energy from? If when Rob would have been around, and if he hadn't died and said, you take the kids on a trip, the kids wouldn't want to go eat this meal that you described, blah, blah, whatever you said. Okay, that's not how you said it, but you said these words, which are great. You may not have had the fuel or the strength to do it. So not in spite of, likely, it's because of. So it's like, again, Rob becomes more, his value becomes more. It's all of life belongs, all of it. There's nothing wasted in this economy. Like in this source of love, there's nothing wasted. So it's like, when we come, I think, face to face with being like, which one do I choose? Do I choose the lion here or the lamb? Which one is this, good or bad? And it's like, so we're going to move on to wins and losses now. And what actually, again, what gifts of adversity actually are. And I want to hear some of them for you. But it's like, we come into this nuance awareness that actually life cares less and loves more. Reality, which is life, it loves us more. We think, why doesn't it care? Why did you take Rob? Or my Aunt Helen might be going, why did my husband Ed go away? And it's like, actually, when you harmonize with reality and with life, and when you entrain yourself to want it as it is, versus saying, this was sent as a roadblock and I did it to get over, and look, I proved to myself I'm strong. Fair enough. But all of a sudden we realize, wait a minute, how are these things actually beautiful things that came into our life? And don't get me wrong, I would want Rob there for you today. I'm not suggesting different.
I totally get it. Yeah.
But it's like happening because of. And it's, you know, whatever. It's just a, you know, like an interesting place.
Yeah,
so
it's,
anyway,
it's that whole stumbling blocks versus stepping stones. You know, again, it's a shift in perspective. How do you see them? And
right.
I you know, people always say to me like, oh, you must ask yourself all the time, why did this happen to me? And I said, actually, I have not once asked myself that question. Not once, not even in the early days, interestingly
That's
enough.
not going to help.
So
it's not going to help anyway.
I just, well, but you don't think logically in the beginning. And for me, it was more like that deep feeling and inner knowing. When Rob passed, I thought something so deep and so profound only happens when there's also very deep and profound meaning behind it. Nothing in the universe happens meaningless. I've got the biggest belief in that. And again, I know that everybody's faith is different, but this is mine and it works very well for me.
And when you can stumble into meaning beyond giving it meaning, oh my goodness, that's a brilliant, you know, right? When you can actually go, how are these pictures on my wall? How is this not sent to make me miserable and make me feel like, oh, it's all over? And it's like, I'm trying to give a different meaning. I'm trying to give a different meaning. Also, one day it's like, you know what? Because of that, these things mean this now, and it just speaks to you. All of a
Mm.
sudden, you have this blah 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 on the beach somewhere else. This
Yeah.
food, you know what I mean? It's all
Mm.
so. Let's move on to gifts. And one of the things that I know that I want to talk with you about, because there's so many gifts found in not only wins but in losses. So some people would say
Mm.
gifts of adversity. I say wins and losses. Wins and losses is a
Mm.
concept we all understand. Who doesn't want to win more? Who doesn't not want?
Mm.
Who doesn't want to walk away from losses? Say it like this, right?
Yeah.
And I'll define it like this, and I'd like to have your take on it once I'm just going to unpack for a little bit here.
Mm.
For me, wins and losses are simple and simply experiences for us to take in. They're experiences for us to
Mm.
appreciate and appreciate what comes up for us when these rich emotions, all of them, they flood into our being and they flood through our veins. Like
Mm.
what happened for you earlier, like, I'm feeling it, right?
Mm.
Though you can say a win is the opposite of a loss, though you can say that, and though you might think and you see that they stand at the energetic polarities that are opposite to one another, they come together in the middle for an electrifying, life-giving tension that allows us to exist. So when you
Mhm.
consider, so listeners, if you want to try this, I do this frequently, and I do this with my clients as well. But if you consider the human, you consider yourself, your skin, so just touch your skin for a bit if you like. Your skin is an outside envelope that allows things to stay inside. Without it, everything would flop out. And
Mm.
this skin allows for pressure to build on the inside. This type of pressure, of course, is a version of tension.
Mhm.
Without pressure, things would just fall out. Now, what's interesting when you consider the pressure that your skin affords on the inside. So you yourself are made of pressure. Without pressure, there's nothing. So people go, I'm pressed from both sides. I don't want to be. And we go like, and we try these acronyms. Yeah, but you know what happens to
Mm.
diamonds? If you're pressed from both sides, you become something. People go, eh. But
Mm.
then if we bring it really close to home, we are
Mhm.
like a diamond because we're pressured from the inside. Now, what's interesting is pressure leads to compression. Here's how. When you consider your skeletal system, so there's a term called tensegrity.
Mhm.
Your skeletal system, if you consider your vertebrae are not directly hitting each other, but they're a little separate. So
Mhm.
there's something, so they're kind of floating. Your whole skeletal system, all your bone structure is floating inside a pressurized space. And what allows it to float is the pressure creates the pressure, or sorry, the pressure from the skin, and what allows gives the skeletal system the compression to stay tightly knit so that your bones don't poke through your or try to poke through your skin. It stays balanced in the center. Think about the miracle
Mm.
of that.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting about a win and a loss, it's not good and it's not bad. They're
Mm.
just experiences to take in. Both are energetically charged and draw us to a tension-rich state versus a conflicted, inner warring state. For a lot of people, they go, I don't want tension. I don't want tension. The worst thing is if we don't have tension, we ourselves don't exist. There's no pressure, there's no compression, right? When you think about that, a state of, this warring place is basically a state and a place that we go to experience how instead of us feeling warring, we go to this place where we get to come together and for an unshakable state of peace. So may you go in pieces. You say that so that you can have the peace. You fear not having peace. You fear you're falling apart. So you say the thing you don't want to do, and literally it happens. You can have this peace in every moment, a peaceful place of
Mm.
electrifying tension that creates the spark of life. Think about this. Without pressure, there would be no life. Everything would fall apart.
Mm.
You yourself,
Yeah.
the listener, you wouldn't exist. Without the
Mm.
intense pressure that creates compression, there would be no structure for everything to hang on and everything's formed onto within you. Now, Marie, when you
Mm.
consider your journey with some rather, and I mean rather, and listener, she's had some intense wins and losses in her life. How would you define a win and a loss? How would you define it? That's my definition of how would you define it?
Yeah. So I need to talk a little bit about that word loss because obviously the name of my group is Loving Life After Loss. And I actually
Mm,
thought about whether I wanted to rename it and decided against it for that very
mhm,
reason.
mhm,
I don't talk about the loss of my husband anymore because I don't see it as such anymore. So I now talk about Rob's passing. When Rob passed over, when Rob died, I use these terms because they are more true to me and they reflect more of what happened rather than the loss. When we talk about a loss, it implies that there's something gone that we still needed. And that's not the truth. It's not that I wouldn't still want him to be here or would be happy if he wasn't still here. I'm not saying that. Yet that happened for a reason. This is my belief. This is my belief that we have chosen that on a spiritual level for both of us. I also realized what an enormous amount of love it took for Rob to choose that part of the story. And I honor that as a massive gift. So when you boil it down, to me, there is only wins at the end of the day. When you really want to just use those two words as polarities, wins and losses. And to me, there's actually just a win-win situation. We both chose that because we both wanted something. We wanted to learn something from that. We wanted to gain something from that. We have gifts to spread into this world. And Rob is just the exact huge part of all of that, like I am. I chose the part of now delivering those gifts. Rob chose the part of, departing early for us to be able to co-create this. This is how I see it, So I really cannot talk about loss anymore. However, I have decided to keep that title. It's a title of my first book, which then turned into the movement. So it's got the same title. And I kept it because this is where I'm picking people up from.
Bingo.
I need to speak their language to pick them up from where they're at.
And this is exactly the reason why I've chosen the term wins and losses, because everybody understands that. And you know what the interesting thing is, like you say, when we lose things, you say, I don't think that we lose things that you said, how did you put this before? We lose something that's needed. And you go, I don't think that's necessarily true. The only thing
I
is,
said if we talk about this as a loss, it implies that I would still need it right now.
Right. And what's interesting, though, you would really appreciate if Rob was here, and to some degree he's needed, but you found a way. See, this is, again, when you go, and if you don't like the idea of 5 stages of grief, or however you look at this, but when you go beyond, you allow everything to serve you, every emotion, every stage of life to fuel you for the next thing. Everything is an arrow pointing, not in an anxious presence way, to strive to the next thing and fear not progressing fast enough, but it's all designed for your forward evolution. And so the concept, and you said it, bingo, you said the word gain. Here's what I think most people try to do, and I might be off on this, but I see this everywhere. People say, what am I supposed to do? They say either I do this or I do that. And they don't ever leave room for what these two tensions, if these two are considered warring conflicts, they are not going to be happy. But if they see these as tensions, you bring them into the middle, into a state of neutrality, actually, the polarities coming together for ultimate gain constantly. Now, we don't have to turn a weed into a flower. That's not what we're doing here. But I love how you're languaging it. You're saying, and just like you're keeping the word loss. Why? Because the survival mechanism, which, by the way, if we don't address the survival mechanism, we can never thrive. Some people are like, forget the survival. That's so antiquated. That is so, archaic.
So important.
No, you got to address it. And guess what?
Absolutely.
There are some things, if you dig in far enough in my psychology, I've worked on myself like crazy, you too, but my being, if you would really go, if you would do neural mapping, different things there, and this is across the board. We all have fear of loss. We all do. It's perceived half the time. So it's like this. Even how can we take perceptions and use it for our gain? How? We say we're not going to get rid of them. We're going to say, we hear you. We hear the wins that we want. We feel all this stuff. We bring it together and we let it be the energy that creates the magic of now you get to look at these posters that you had in your room. Instead of being like the hellish, I can't believe we did this. Now I'm like, I'm looking at this stuff, right? And now, right? And instead you
Yeah.
use it for the
Yeah.
gain of, and you're going,
Yeah.
it's more, right? So I love that.
Yeah.
Marie, tell me, where do you struggle? Where do you struggle?
I, ooh, I'm going to be super transparent here. I still struggle in not going that alone. I constantly struggle in allowing myself to find that balance. And I'm being honest here, I still
Mhm.
haven't found the perfect balance. I'm getting better and better at it. So when it happens, it doesn't completely throw me out anymore.
Mm,
It goes like, oh, hold on, I know what to do. Oh, I know. And I'm still doing this, kind of
mm,
finding my balance with allowing help in and asking for help. And that
mm,
is one of
mm,
the biggest topics in my healing journey that I talk with people.
mm,
And I get it because I see every single person who has experienced such adversity struggling with this. Here's the thing that happens in my brain. I'm being completely transparent here. It's like, okay, I have come to a point in my life where I'm
mhm,
so freaking self sufficient, where I'm so freaking strong and I can do it all on my own and I don't need any help. And this, by the way, is divine masculine talking. Yeah. And for me, the divine masculine was so important to come through after I passed. I needed to be the provider. I needed to be strong. I
mm,
needed to,
mm,
it was so needed. It was nothing that happened consciously, it happened on a subconscious level. And then there is the point that part of me, and I've just done a really most beautiful experience around embracing all parts of me, and it has brought so much peace to me. So that's why the calibrating is getting easier and easier. There was that point where my divine feminine roared up and went like, excuse me, hello, like, where am I in all of this? I need to be soft. And I'm very intentionally not using the word weak, I'm using the word soft.
mm.
I need to be soft. I need to be seen. I need to shine. I want to be beautiful. I want to be nurtured and taken care of.
And the feminine
And
presence is all about receiving. That's feminine presence.
absolutely, absolutely. So here is I provide, I do it all, I can do it all. I don't need anybody around me. I can do that.
Hmm.
Definitely true. No questions asked, but how freaking exhausting is that? And here's I still want somebody to help me. I want to receive. I want to do this, Um,
Isn't it
here's a super,
amazing?
super,
Is
yeah,
Yeah, isn't it
kind
amazing
of please.
how we can surprise ourselves by showing up with delivering exactly what was needed? Think about
Yeah,
your journey. The dad was gone. They asked you the question, your boys,
yeah,
who's going to be our, we're
yeah,
not going to have a dad. You know what? You instantly, you know what? Isn't that
yeah,
so beautiful? And now you're waking up to, you get to
yeah,
bring, you don't need to feel threatened
yeah,
that you
yeah,
died to the feminine. You know, isn't that just an
yeah,
amazing art? Like, again, how it
mm,
is that we can show up in these ways, to me,
yeah,
just like the human being is
yeah,
just incredible, right? Incredible. So we're kind of
yeah.
running low on time here. What we'll do, if you're
That's
okay
fine.
with this, is, and I love
Mm,
this so much, so perhaps at some point we'll do this again. But I got
mm,
four more questions, and they're all about your
perfect.
struggle. So if you don't mind, we'll do
Yeah,
popcorn style, just like put it in brief term if you can, like a sentence too, or even a short
go for
paragraph.
it. I keep it
Lovely.
short and sweet.
You explain so well. So thank you. So what is this struggle teaching you in real time? So in real time, when you have the struggle, in real time,
Mm,
you're going, oh, it's teaching me this. Oh, it's
mm,
showing me this. What is it teaching you?
yeah, yeah. It's literally teaching me asking for help because the biggest
Mm,
struggle and why it is a struggle is often that we think, but what if somebody's not there anymore? And then we have opened up and then we started to rely on other people helping us. It's like, no, everything's temporary. It's okay if I ask 10 times and once or twice, maybe somebody's going to say no. Let's be realistic. Most of the time, somebody will be there to help you.
mm,
And if it's
mhm,
the one time where they can't, then at least I had 8 or 9 other times where they
mhm.
can. So it's literally reminding ourselves that it is okay. It's a learning curve. It's not going to happen overnight. It sounds so much easier than it's done, but yeah.
It's funny sometimes how struggle, like you say, you're struggling with this. It's actually
Mm,
revealing to you in real time the simplicity of what might be right in front of you, which is logic.
exactly.
You're like,
I
hello,
love it.
I know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hello.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. So, what are you becoming fascinated by through this struggle? Fascinating. So,
Mm,
you're going deeper. Like, what are you becoming fascinated by? Like, whoa, this is really interesting.
yeah. what was really, really fascinating for me in this entire process was an exercise that I told you about, that learning to embrace all parts of me. And the
Mm,
fascinating factor in that was how
mm,
every single part of me, not just the divine masculine and feminine, the defined teenager, the helpless child, the, you know,
mm,
like all of these parts that came together, the mama bear, the higher self, all of these, each and every one of them plays a very important role. I'm nothing without one of them. I'm completely
mm,
unbalanced without one of them. Once you embrace all of them for their beauty and strength and
mhm.
whatever they bring to the party, this is when you start feeling more and more whole. And that's a fascinating process for me. I love it.
Yeah, isn't that such an interesting, so just using the word fascination, to me, it's always such a
Mm,
fascination how, so on the concept of trust, sometimes we look
mm,
back, so we have memory of, and we're like, well, I could have done it like
mm,
this and this and this. But then, like you say, if we're not just dystopic and always thinking how we did it all bad and wrong, we become aware that, again, our innate ability somehow, whether we train on this or not, makes no difference.
mm,
Somehow, when we look back, we're like, our innate ability decided, because it had to trust that what it was going to do was going to be meaningful. So it decided something.
mm,
And if you had asked the boys that you took care of, they'd more than likely
mm,
say, we're so thankful you brought that at that stage of our life. Like, it's such a
mm,
fascinating, when we can trust that
mm,
what we did then, we can't look back. Like, if you know, if I
mm,
think about myself now, if I look 5 years back and go like, yeah, I wonder why I did that. I do it differently now. That's not the point. The point is we need to get in tune with what may have happened back then, and then be like,
mm,
actually, it's so interesting that my innate ability said to do that, and I had to trust that, and then to action that.
mm.
What kind of courage would that take? You're like, wow,
Yeah.
that's
Mm.
amazing. So anyway, I love your take on it. Just an amazing thing. So thank you so much. Hey, last
Thank
question.
you.
Oh, there's two more questions. So
Mhm.
the last one's where people can find you. But the second last question is, and these five questions I'd scripted. The other ones I didn't really, but these five I really wanted to get nailed,
Yeah,
like get down pat,
sure.
right? So because of this struggle, this struggle, like you're talking
Mhm.
about, right?
Mhm.
Leaning back into the divine feminine, receiving, being okay with receiving,
Mm.
and
Mm.
perhaps I don't know what it is. Like perhaps you're like, yeah, but if I do this, then does that mean that I won't be masculine for my boys either? But of course, we know it's not either
Mm.
or, it's both and, right? So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
because of the struggle, what is it that's fostering inside of you that you know is required for you to experience another new dimension of living? So what is this all fostering inside of you
Mm.
that you know is a
Yeah.
requirement, and where do you
Yeah.
think you might be headed? So again, we're not
The
trying to
answer
bring
is
meaning
super
to,
simple.
right? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So the answer for me is that trusting that inner guidance, the intuition, and that was one of the biggest gifts in my adversity. That my intuition just went through the roof, and I just
Mm,
saw a really, really fascinating talk. I'm gonna have to give her a mention as well, Dr. Ricky Chain Adams, and
mhm,
she actually talks about intuition from a scientifically proven background, and not
mm,
intuition like something woo woo, something that you feel. It's actually scientifically proven. And she also talks about heart math and stuff. It would go way too far to go
mm,
into more detail,
mhm,
but please, please, please check her out.
mm,
Dr. Ricky Jane Adams, she talks about it. And for me, it was literally that learning day by day,
mhm.
learning day
Somebody
by
just walked
day.
by my office here. A friend walked by, and
Yeah, and
his
I'm
name
just
is
waving
Jagger.
to.
He just walked by, and I'm like, hey, I'm just gonna wave at him. He was waving, so there you go.
I love it. Real
Thank
life
you.
scenario. I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah, yeah.
I had my cat walking past. I'm like, I can't get up now and let her in because
Ah,
it's raining outside. I'm like, she's safe under the. Anyway, coming
yeah,
back,
yeah.
intuition, trusting that inner guidance, like really learning to trust that I am
Yeah. Mm,
always looked after. I really truly feel that on a daily basis. And the more I trust it, the more I feel it. It's an incredible gift. I just feel very, very looked after and guided. Yet it also takes for me to deliberately and intentionally step into that person that I am becoming through the process, and reminding myself of that. Because I have days, I
mm,
can tell you that,
mhm,
where I feel like I just want to run away from all of this. It feels too
mhm.
hard basket, too much responsibility, etc.
It's
But
normal.
there is such a tiny fraction of the amazing gifts that I feel when I'm in the flow and when I'm being that person who I want to be, who I chose to be, who I'm creating to be. So it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Yeah, I see a lot of gifts in there.
I love it. Trusting. So this is my little nugget, and I'm just taking all of what you said, and this is a little gift for the rest of you. This is just what came into my awareness. But what helpeth it us, any of us? There's what helpeth it us. What does it help us to shame and blame our inner innate wisdom, our inner guidance? What does it help? It doesn't help. The opposite, like what you're saying, is when you build a healthy relationship with trusting your inner guidance. She says she wants to feel taken care of. Guess what trusting does for her? She feels taken care of. She feels lighter. She's receiving. Trusting is you open to receive, because trust says, I can't do everything about this. I have to trust, meaning at the base of it all lies receiving within trust. And it's just such a beautiful. So thank you for being the presence on this call, and for sharing your little nippets and your snippets and all your goodness. It's just been super nice. Listen, what I want to do is I want to make it easy for people.
And right back at you. Thank you for all the beautiful questions. I really enjoy that.
Where can people find you?
So the easiest, I always give them my, it's mariealessi.com. So my first name, last name.com, because from there you literally have everything to find me, to find my books. You've got the 2 books, the TEDx talk on there, different interviews, an option to book a little chat with me, to subscribe to my favorite newsletter, Sparks of Joy, because we talked about joy so much. I have like a little daily newsletter, literally 2-3 lines per day, that really helps people spark their joy, and various other things. So it's just super simple. You can read all about my courses and retreats and everything on there. So yeah, mariealessi.com.
Beautiful. So for the spelling, for those of you who are taking notes, spelling is www.mariealessi.com. Again, that's www.mariealessi.com. So Marie, thank you so much. And you know what? Ultimate gift for me that I observe when I hear your story, you took something that was very different and very difficult, and you didn't just convert it without doing the work and actually going through the process. And I really enjoy observing you coming into the appreciation that who you've always been is trustworthy, and to you standing on that, you should be proud, my lady. You should be proud. You did a good job. Good job. Just keep on going. Good job.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
I sincerely hope you enjoyed that little interplay. Whether you choose me as your guide or not, that's simply great. Why, you ask? Well, because you've listened to the very end of this podcast, you're clearly one of those people that's made a clear decision to invest in yourself. And how isn't that just the best news? That's great news. If you decide you need and want one of these 4 things, or maybe all 4, let me know. If you want to get unstuck by activating your creativity and inner resources, if you want to see things clearly by learning how to lean into difficult situations so that you can discover life-changing gifts brilliantly disguised within each experience, if you want to get to your next level, who doesn't want to get to the next level without anxious striving? And if you want to live with vibrant energy and passion, simply go to www.jamesheppner.com for one-on-one coaching, or go to www.weeklywinsandlosses.com for the no-charge Friday noon global call. That's the Weekly Wins and Losses virtual call. So again, I thank you for investing in yourself. See you next time. My sincere hope is that you've gleaned a few nuggets for yourself and a few pieces of interest that help you move forward in your unique journey. So again, I thank you for joining me here. This is James Heppner clocking out. Until next time, peace out, rock up.